Hello and welcome to our special Sustainable Living Festival broadcast of the Beyond Zero show, and broadcast live around Melbourne on 3CR Radio and later syndicated on the Community Radio Network. And today our special guest is David Suzuki, and Vivian will introduce David. And a big hello to Vivian, Nick and David.
Thank you. This is a really wonderful day. Last night, the great debate was euphoric, I would say. The speakers were all like-minded. It wasn't a real debate. They weren't antagonistic, but David spoke last, and I think, people were quite delighted to hear him. And he spoke about hard matters, such as a crime between the generations, intergenerational crime, and a lot of things about his life that have made him persevere as an activist. A lot of us would admire him for his many, many years of work and his many books that have inspired people. So I'd really like to welcome you, David.
Well, thank you for having me. Actually, I'm coming here and being totally inspired by what I'm hearing about the program. I mean, actual indication that it can be, you can achieve zero emissions, and within the time frame that we require, and it's not going to break the bank, which I find amazing. And so I'm here as a student learning from you more than anything.
I wondered if you'd like to talk about that intergenerational crime that you mentioned last night. You appealed especially to young people to speak to their elders about and to use all the viral technology-savvy ways that they can to get this message out. Because you said we know already, the fossil fuels know already, and you mentioned that book by Merchants of Doubt, saying that the science is in, people know already, but they're continuing to commit this crime, which will affect people unborn.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that what we're doing by living the lifestyle we are, and without really any serious initiatives, at least in countries like Canada and the United States, to begin to radically reduce our emissions within a short time, without even making the attempt, we ensure that the problems we leave for our children and our grandchildren is just increasingly greater. You see, my generation and the generation of the boomers, we partied as if there's no tomorrow. We've wanted everything now. We've used it up without thinking about our children and grandchildren. I always remember Groucho Marx, who said, "Why should I worry about future generations? What did they ever do for me?" And that seems to be our attitude. It's all about me, and I want to go to the shopping, and I want to get my big car, and I want to do all of this stuff without a thought about what the consequences will be for our children and grandchildren. And we just can't afford to keep doing that, I think. Since the panel last night discussed why is the environmental movement failing. And I think we were all in agreement there that it is true that we are failing. That is not to say that it has been a failure. In fact, it's been an enormous success. Starting in 1962 with Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, the environmental movement has been unbelievably important. I can't imagine what the world would be like had it not happened. We've got millions of acres of wilderness that have been preserved. We've got laws against polluting the air, the water, protecting endangered species. But the reality now is that we are losing momentum as the corporate agenda speeds up. And when I think my wife and I have had a major crisis, and we both sat down one night. We're a tiny organization in Canada, the David Suzuki Foundation, but we have a budget. We don't take money from corporations, and we don't take money from government. We take money from individual Canadians for whom $30, $40, $50 donation is a big gift. Our budget is over $8 million a year. Compared to Exxon, it's nothing. But we sat down and said, we've existed now for 20 years as an organization. Canadians have donated us tens of millions of dollars, and we're going backwards. And we began to despair. It's time to have a correction here. We're not going to achieve anything if we keep carrying on the way we have. What's happened to the discourse? The early years of environmentalism, we were very powerful, even though we lacked the resources of a corporation. The environmental movement was powerful because we spoke the truth. We spoke the truth that was based on science. And that credibility as truth-sayers is what got us over the hump in terms of the lack of money. Today, the world is very, very different because truth doesn't matter. And this is where we've got to recognize when we have people who don't care about lying, cheating, stealing, exaggerating, who have an agenda in which scientific information or facts are no longer the case. We're in a very different world today. And we've got to ask I've been blown away by what you've done there and with your plan to decarbonize your country. It can be done. But my bet is the arguments against it are going to be immense. And just on the basis of facts and logic and rationality, we're not going to win. And so the challenge to us now is, how do we break through that and still maintain our credibility? Our credibility has been that our science was impeccable. So this is the challenge. When I leave Australia, this is where I see the big challenge, is that we're living in a different world.
The audience, fortunately, had the opinion, there was a poll done at the end of the event, they had the opinion that yes, it is failing us, but everybody, or most people, were optimistic that it could succeed.
Well, they were optimistic that environmentalism has an opportunity. But I think the important point here is it was Einstein that said doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different answer, is the definition of insanity.
Yes.
So we've been very, very successful for the first 20 years. But now I think doing the same thing over and over, despite this magnificent document you've just given to me, it's not going to work now. We've got to... That work is priceless, but we've got to find out a different way of reaching people with that message and motivating them.
David, could I ask you, yesterday I attended your film, which was a wonderful film which listeners can see next Sunday, tomorrow. We'll announce the details at the end. But in the film, you were speaking to students and you had a masterclass with the students, appealing to them to acknowledge this crime that's being handed on to them and to deal with their parents, which is us. And in the film, I saw you floated down a little candle at the river in Hiroshima, and on the candle it said, I think, no war, world peace and Mother Earth. And I've heard this word Mother Earth come up at the Cochabamba conference. They talked about Pachamama, and people here we've had floods and cyclones, and everyone in the press goes, oh, Mother Nature is dealing us a bad deal, as if we've got nothing to do with it, as if we're sort of children, with no agency at all, and Mother Nature's just having a go at us. Well, what's wrong with our attitude to Mother Nature? You said that we should be more biocentric, and I know you're a geneticist, but...
I think that's the heart of our crisis now, is that most people in Canada and Australia live in big cities. What is it? 85% of Australians live in big cities. Yep. Only 100 years ago, most people in the world, and including Australia and Canada, lived in rural village communities. We were farmers. And farmers understand very well that we're embedded in nature and dependent on it, that weather and climate are everything in terms of whether they're going to succeed from year to year. They know that insects are important to pollinate flowering plants, that certain species of plants will take nitrogen from the air, fix it as fertilizer. Farmers understand the importance of the water cycle. I mean, they know we depend on nature. When in only 100 years, most of us have moved into big cities. And in a big city, it's easy to think, well, we're not like any other creatures. We're smart. We create our own habitat. And as long as we have a few parks out there where we can go and camp and play, who needs nature? I mean, we live in a city. And in a city, your biggest priority is your job, because you have to work in order to make money to buy the things that you need. And so our focus then becomes the economy. And Mother Earth, that connection that farmers have, we lose that in an urban setting. So I think that's a large part of our sense now that it's the economy that's the source of everything that matters. We've got a Prime Minister in Canada who is out-Howarding John Howard, who has said for 5 years...
That's pretty hard.
John Howard actually sent people over to advise him, and who is saying that we can't afford to do anything about reducing emissions, it'll destroy the economy. So the Prime Minister of Canada has elevated the economy above the very air that we breathe, the very atmosphere that sustains all life on Earth. And that, I think, is a result of a loss of a sense of connection or embeddedness with the natural world. So my approach now has been very, very simple. Lesson number one, uncontroversial, it's indisputable truth. We are animals. Now, you go to parts of the United States and get up in front of an audience and say, we're animals. People are pissed off. Don't you dare call me an animal. We're human beings. And look at the way, if you call someone a chicken or a pig or a snake or a worm or an ape, these are insults because we think that somehow we're superior to those animals. I was in a store in Calgary and the front store said, no animals allowed. And I told the owner of the store, you enforce that, you're not going to have customers. We don't think that we are animals. And as biological creatures, if you don't have air for more than 3 minutes, you're dead. If you don't have clean air, you're sick. If you don't have water for a few days, you're dead. You know, you have dirty water, you're sick. Same thing with your food that comes from the soil. Our most elementary need is earth, air, fire, and water, what Aboriginal people have known since the beginning of time. And we've forgotten that. And because of that, we now can disconnect the economy from the very things that keep us alive. The economy becomes the most important thing, and so we then use air, water, and soil as a garbage can. And somehow we think that we can have healthy people when we've got an unhealthy planet. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Very simple truths. If we get that deeply embedded in us, then it seems to me that it makes no sense to carry on as we do now.
But I'd say that the economy is a man-made thing, and therefore we can change it. We can't change the biosphere, and we can't change anything about our...
Exactly. But, you know, the way you talk to a neoconservative and you say, well, the market, and right away the word market is like, oh, God, the market, my God, the market, free the market, let the market do everything. What a lot of bullshit. The market is something we invented, for God's sakes. It's not something that emerged out of nature. And the idea, you know, that we go from boom to bust to boom to bust, that somehow we got to live with that, that's absurd. We've got a system that's not working. Something's wrong. We can fix economies. We can fix corporations. We can fix markets. But we can't fix Mother Nature and what Mother Nature does for us and the fact that we're biological creatures.
David, in your masterclass, you spoke about how the youth of today are going to be passing on this knowledge to... or the next generation is passing on the challenge to the youth of today, and what role the youth have to communicate issues surrounding climate change to their parents and the older generation. Can you speak more about how you see that being communicated between the generations?
Well, you see, I think that we had yesterday, for those of you that don't know, we met with a group of children, young people that were chosen from schools across Victoria. 300 kids were brought to Melbourne to take part in this exercise, and 12 of them were chosen to be in what they called a master class, and they were charged with working out a speech. Each of them was to give a 2-minute speech. And I think that it was a very exciting experiment. I think it was a failure, and it was a failure because of the way it was constructed. The minute that the 12 kids were instructed to give a speech, they were completely focused now on what they were going to say. When I walked in, one of the boys covered his notes. He didn't want to show it to anybody because that's not what the idea was. We were going to bring the children together and work together to work out, it seemed to me, how we give a speech. And then we weren't focused on who is the speech for. Is the speech for adults or is the speech for our fellow children? And then I was excited by the idea because young people work and communicate in ways old farts like me don't have a clue. I don't own a cell phone. And I know that kids are text messaging all the time and they're communicating, you know, and that YouTube is big and Facebook and all those things that they have at their disposal. I wanted to find out from them, how would you communicate your ideas to your fellow students? So I really expected that one group would come up with a new rap. I thought maybe some group would work out a skit. I don't know, maybe they would figure out something to put on YouTube, a submission to Facebook. I wanted the kids, but it was driven by the adults who were there saying, look, we want you in the next hour and a half work out a 2-minute speech. And so we didn't respect them enough to say, you're the ones that know all the technology that's available. You show us what's capable. So I think we didn't exploit the possibilities, and so we learned from that, and I hope next year, when you do it again here, it'll be a much deeper kind of exercise.
Now, what about if you're a kid and you are trying to tell your parents? I mean, you're not likely to tweet them because your parents don't know how to tweet. No. How does a young person get to their parents and knock them out of their complacency and into helping so we can have a combined effort, a combined front to tackle these challenges?
Well, again, that must vary from family to family. I mean, I know some kids that have laid down the line with mom and dad and said, look, mom and dad, you want to have quality time with me? Then turn off your bloody BlackBerry and be with me. You know, maybe you just have to get their attention. Parents, you know, they're not evil. I don't think they're not stupid. But often they're so distracted because our lives are so full of things to do. We're so busy. We ignore the most important things going. And I think kids they have to get their parents' attention somehow. If young people can't get their parents to care about what they're worried about, we're in deep trouble.
Politicians, they have children too, and we've known of children of politicians who are great on the environment front, but you know, how is it they can't get through to their parents?
I know. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. But I think that this is the most important thing that young people can do today, because in my experience, very hard to get adults to change their way. You know, they've gone through all the years of it, getting an education, they get a job, they finally get a house, they get married, they have kids, and environmentalists come along and poke their finger in their face and say, you got to change your ways. They don't like that. They get mad. But if children say, Mom, Dad, look, I really am worried. Like, what is the world going to be like when I grow up? Is it going to be like the world when you were a kid? The minute a child starts asking that, I don't see how a parent can avoid becoming warriors on behalf of their children.
Can I ask you a question about the media? I know you've had a long history as a television broadcaster in Canada, and in your recent book, the autobiography, you said that you look back over your old programs, and in the early days you'd have talking heads for 3 minutes, and now the best you'd get would be 20 seconds, which is a contemptible amount of time to get a complex message, and we're facing these complex issues. I do feel the media is largely responsible for the way people think, and even these young children you spoke to yesterday are the victims of the sort of fast media that they've received.
Yes.
So what do you think the media needs to do?
Well, I mean, the media are the media. The media are not driven by the need to inform or educate people. The media are interested in getting an audience so they can sell advertising or whatever. Even public broadcasting in Canada, the CBC, which is like your ABC, if our ratings drop, we would have been off the air in an instant. You know, we're driven by the same drive, although it's not for revenue now, it's for other things. The Nature of Things is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It's the longest running series on Canadian television. I became the host of it in 33 years ago and have hosted it. And it's a very important avenue for informing people, but the audience over the time has dropped steadily because more and more channels are opening up, and the viewer has a concentration span of a hummingbird. You know, they're just, you take that remote control and boy, you're just clicking through there like so fast. I don't know how many channels you have in Australia, but we have in any city, you've got at least 90 channels to choose from. If you have a satellite dish, my daughter lives on a reservation in northern British Columbia. Her husband has a giant satellite in his backyard. They have about 500 channels. I mean, it's crazy. But that means when they click onto a show, you've got to be pretty sensational or else they're just going to be off you in a few seconds. So even our program, we're caught up. Everything is shorter and shorter. It's sexier. It's more violent. It's more sensational. Our biggest blockbusters have been a show on the penis called Fallacies. We had female castration. Sex hormones that change sexual development. I mean, we had a show on psychopaths. We're caught up in the same thing. It's become increasingly trivial.
Yet last night you saw that euphoric audience. People will listen at a town hall meeting like that to a long talk. They're engaged with it. People can do it.
Oh, yeah. But our children are very, very different. We used to buy long playing records and listen to every cut on the record. Now kids don't even listen to a whole song. They take clips of it. And it's a different world out there. And somehow we've got to, we may decry it, but that's the reality. We've got to find a way to use that, it seems to me.
You're listening to 3CR Radio, special live broadcast from the Sustainable Living Festival at Federation Square. The Sustainable Living Festival will be running today, Saturday and tomorrow. And you can come down to Federation Square opposite the Flinders Street station and join in all the fun of the festival, including talks program, workshops and stalls on all things sustainable living and environmental activism. Now, David, it seems that the corporate media, the people with the money, often say, it's the dollars versus the numbers. They've got the dollars and they can create a big narrative and a big story and keep us all in the dark, keep us like mushrooms. How do we best organise so that we can talk from one person to another, town hall meetings, what have you? How can we take on the dollars with our only resource, which is the numbers?
Well, I think that it has to be done on a person-to-person basis. We have to engage communities. That's the level at which I think we are most effective and most credible. We've got to engage in conversation. But it's got to be a dialogue. I think the environmental movement made a big mistake, like many of the aid programs that we've had in the past. You have a big organization that goes in with millions of dollars into Africa. We go into a poor community and say, gee, you've got real problems here. We're going to give you a few $1 million, and this is what you got to do. Never works. Because it's as if you come from Mars and you're just giving us money. Well, they'll take your money, but unless you respect the people, that they have knowledge and ideas that are worth considering so that they can embrace their creation of solutions, it isn't going to work. And I think too often as environmentalists, we've come into communities and said, look, you're clear-cutting this forest and, that's going to reduce biodiversity. Now, this is what you got to do. We have to respect the people and get them engaged in the dialogue so we all understand that we're standing on the same platform. And then we can begin to work together, and the solutions will come out of those communities. We don't have to have all the answers. I mean, the big stuff like you've done, that's fantastic. But in order to get the engagement, we have to engage the local community so that they want it. They see that we need to get it. That's energy intensive. That's not going to be easy.
So we're looking out at an audience here of about 150 people, and if there was 150 people here and they're excited by seeing David Suzuki speak, what would you advise each of those people? They're going to become activists now because we obviously need a lot more activists than what we've got. Where can they start and how can they do it?
Well, for me, it's there are all kinds of avenues to go on, I guess. It may sound flippant, but I've tried to summarize what I've learned in a lifetime through the film that I did, that is going to be released in Australia, I think, next month. It's called Force of Nature. Now, the force of nature is not me. I'm saying humanity has become a force of nature. That is, you have cyclones hitting Australia, you have droughts, you have floods. These are not natural disasters anymore. These are unnatural disasters, and human beings are a part of it because we have become a force of nature. The Nobel Prize winner Paul Crutzen has said, we divide up the history of the Earth into epochs. These are periods of time that are influenced by geological events, the movement of plates and all that stuff. And this period we're in should be called the Anthropocene epoch, because human beings have become a geological force. We're altering the chemistry, the physics, and the biology of the planet on a scale as has never been done by a single species ever in the history of life on Earth. So this is the discussion that we have to begin. If you can go to the film Force of Nature, as I said, it's kind of flippant and self-interested, then tell other people to go to the thing. All of the ideas I have are basically summarized there. And that, I hope, begins the discussion. So in Canada now, the film has had its run in the theaters, and now dozens and dozens of small communities are renting halls and hiring the film for a one-night showing to use it as the beginning of a community discussion. And we've got to ask the question, why do I live where I live? What is it that I like here? What do I want it to be when my kids are grown up or my grandchildren are grown up? That's the scale. We've got to start thinking Are we going in a way that the things that I love about this community and value are going to be there for my children and grandchildren? We've got a paper called Sustainability Within a Generation, and that's what we do. We say, let's look ahead a generation and see the things that we would like this place to be, and then we have a direction to work with to achieve that. Right now we're going helter-skelter without any idea where the heck we're going.
One question I wanted to ask you about innovation. A lot of people say if we got this renewable energy juggernaut going, it would release a lot of creativity and energy, just like the space program in America, which you talk about in your film. Do you think that's true?
Well, absolutely. I think that this crisis is an unbelievable opportunity. And as Al Gore says in An Inconvenient Truth, the Chinese word for crisis is made up of two parts. One part is danger, and the other part is opportunity. In crisis becomes an opportunity to release that creative effort. And I do like to cite the fact that on October 4th, 1957, I was starting my last year of college in the United States, when the Soviet Union electrified the world by announcing they'd launched a Sputnik into space. We didn't know there was a space program. And it was just a very exciting time, but it was also a very frightening time because the Soviet Union was so powerful. They were rolling over, taking control of many countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, South America. They seemed so powerful. And we began to realize, my God, they are really advanced in science, technology, and medicine. The Americans didn't roll over and say, oh, God, they're so far ahead, we'll never catch up. It'll be too expensive to catch up. They just said, we got to beat these guys. And John F. Kennedy, when he became president, said, we're going to be the first to go to the moon. And they poured money, and nobody complained about deficits or any of that stuff. And here I was a foreigner. I was studying in the United States. All you had to do was say, I like science, and they just threw money at you. It was a golden period. And out of that, not only came the fact that they are the only country to land people on the moon, but things that nobody ever anticipated that came out of that. Cell phones, global 24-hour-a-day news channels, all kinds of technology. There's a list, if you go on the internet, you can find a list of all of the technologies that have spun off as a result of the space program. The space program was just to solve one problem: get men to the moon before the Russians did. But out of that came this creativity that led to all kinds of wonderful things. And there is no question that if we make that commitment to renewables, they're going to be unbelievable. I mean, I see a day when every building is wrapped in a skin of solar, sunshine-absorbing material, where every highway is covered in material that absorbs that sunlight. The possibilities, I think, are huge. Batteries. We're at a primitive level of batteries now. I mean, we just have to put the energy into it. And I keep coming to Australia and chastising Australians. Why is it China is creating 9 out of every 10 solar panels sold in the world? Canadians come to Australia, we would kill for what you've got. It's called sunlight. And yet, why isn't Australia taking advantage of this incredible resource? You've got the intellectual power, you've got the people. What the hell is going on? Instead, I was at Kyoto in 1997. There was Australia whinging away. No, we can't set any hard targets. We depend on coal. We need coal. And what happened? Australia is the only developed country that set a target, was allowed a target above 1990 levels of emissions. All the other industrialized countries said, okay, we'll take a target of 5 to 6% below. And here you are. I land in Australia. I have to look very hard to see a solar panel anywhere. How dare your leaders say that we have to have coal, that this is the way of the future, when you're missing out on this incredible opportunity.
Now, David, there's an alternative view that I don't subscribe to, that if we didn't export that coal as fast as we could out the port, we'd be denying people in developing countries who are undernourished and having trouble sheltering themselves from development. What do you say to that? I get it all the time on my email.
Right. Well, I'm delighted that Australia has such a wonderful feeling towards these poor people. I mean, that's wonderful. And it is true, we owe them a lot because Australians are living way beyond the capacity of this continent to support you in the lifestyle that you've got. You depend on other countries to use their land to produce products and goods that you exploit over here and sell. And you use their land to dump a lot of your toxic emissions. So yes, we do owe it to them. But why should we then export to them the very fuel that we know we have to get rid of? That's crazy. We've got to start exporting them and giving them windmills and solar panels and all of those other opportunities that we know we have to go to and help them leapfrog over the dirty stuff. Thank you all for coming and listening to me rant on. You know, as an elder, I can say anything I want because nobody's going to fire me or whatever. I really mean it deeply. I have fallen madly in love with Australia and have come back here far too often. I have too big a carbon footprint from flying. But I really look to Australia. I have been energized by my visit here. I look to Australia to be one of the countries really showing leadership in this. You've got the people, you've got the studies, you've got the work now. Let's have Australia lead the rest of the world. Thank you.